Welcome to the Specialty Coffee Podcast by Storyline Coffee Roasters. This is our first episode. We have an amazing lineup coming up for you guys with owners of different coffee shops, whether that be Heart Roaster, Sweet Bloom Coffee, Onyx Coffee Labs. We've got U.S. Barista Champion head judges, and who we have on for our first episode, which I consider a dear friend of mine, is Daniel Mendoza. He was a U.S. Coffee Championship judge for the past 4 years. He works at Cropster. He also, on the side, does some work with Spirit Tea, as well as prior jobs with Corvus Coffee in their roasting capacity. He has a ton of wealth of knowledge. And Danielle, I'm super excited to have you on, man. Thanks for coming on.
Awesome, dude. Also, roast for Hawk for a little bit.
Okay.
And Body Brew was my first roasting gig, I will say.
Was that back in Florida or was that here in Colorado?
Yeah, Florida. That's how I started.
Okay.
Yeah, in the past I had no coffee experience. I was just exporting fruits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So did you jump straight in as a coffee roaster or did you get behind the bar?
Bar, but I talk too much, so I keep the line long. So they moved me to the back.
I got you. They're like, hey, we got to keep you away from customers. We're not getting coffee out.
Yep.
That's awesome. So how long did you roast in Florida for?
Almost 2 years.
Okay.
But the head roaster there, I have to sweep floors and bag coffee for so long and then I start roasting one coffee for almost 6 months, the same Brazil Cerrado. So every time I see Brazil Cerrado, it gives me...
Not good memories, huh?
No, it was fun. It was fun.
Yeah.
It's interesting how these days people just jump into the roaster right away.
Mm-hmm.
Back then I had to roast one coffee for 6 months.
I mean, you do really understand that coffee and how it's going to react, though, and I think you get a lot of depth of understanding, to say it in a kind way.
The blender back then, I will say, that was the Brazil. Now Brazil is back to be a blender because of price point, but...
Yeah, no kidding.
But yeah, that's how I
What were
started.
you roasting on back then?
Dietrich IR7, they don't make it anymore. And then the IR12.
Lovely.
And then
Crazy.
Corvus was Gießen, Hawk was Gießen, and then I did some roasting on... I finished like the roasting career in Alluring, which I think I love that closing.
Was that your favorite machine that you roasted on?
Oh, yeah. And I don't know if I can say this, but I also did some roasting on civets. They have improved it. Now I can control the machine through Cropster. So
Oh, no way.
it was awesome because I roast from my computer with the civets engineer. So I was controlling Cropster and roasting from here, and he was the one who put in the coffee in and taking the coffee out. That was really cool.
Wow, no
and
way.
Then he sent me the coffee, and then I cupped the coffees. It was pretty cool.
That's amazing. For those who don't know, what is a civets roaster?
I think it's one of the first fluid bed roasters ever invented by Michael Civets a long time ago.
Right.
In Denver, we have Calaris, I think is the name. They have a Civets.
Yeah. There's one actually up here in BV, which is super crazy. They have a fluid bed civets roaster. So
tell
that's kind of cool.
him to reach out to Civets to get the... I don't even know if it's like they can get the update, but it's awesome because now you can... He put a lot of like different sensors and update the panel to control the machine. I think it's pretty cool. I was impressed by the roast. I did I never done an 8-minute roast.
Oh, wow.
And it actually was an 8-minute roast, and it was pretty cool. We
did
the color reading.
How did it cup?
Oh, I think the coffee had age, but measuring the color and like no defects and things like that, I was my first time using that machine, so I think it's pretty. If you roast more, I bet you can get amazing coffees in that thing.
Wow, that's awesome. What on the technology side of it was different? You said there was multiple probes on the fluid bed because it's just
I think
roasting
he
with hot
updated
air.
a lot of things, not just the sensors. I think the cooling tray is going to be updated. And if everybody who goes to the expo, he's going to hopefully have in there to roast. I don't know where yet, but so people can go and use it.
No,
I think it's a pretty cool experience. It's a completely different system than Loring, knowing that Loring is also a roaster, but it's a completely different system.
Yeah, no kidding. Why did you say, apart from this, I mean, I wouldn't say that Civets maybe was your favorite, but for Loring, why was that your favorite machine to roast on?
Easy to maintain, easy to use, a lot less variables. Behind you have all those variables that the mill cities have.
Yeah.
Loring just have the gas and batch size, so that's all you can think about. And then, of course, you focus more in the green because now you measure more like density and moisture. And when you have just one variable to play with, it helps you to focus more in the sensor analysis.
Okay. Do you feel like that's a benefit or a drawback?
Oh, it's a benefit.
For sure.
After roasting in Giesens that are, I have to always make sure I said the Giesens before 2014.
Okay.
They have changed a lot. They changed. Back then, we have to drill a hole in the front plate to put it in the bean mass. Now, the new Giesens, they have the thermocouple in the front plate. And we have to drill a hole in the exhaust because their probe is inside the exhaust, which is interesting. And but when you have so many variables plus the green coffee itself, then you have to sell pounds, right? And every time you sell a pound of coffee, it has to taste the same. The idea is to taste very similar, so you have consistency. And when you have multiple variables and you want to make changes and dial in the coffee, it just becomes harder and harder. And when you grow, you have to hire somebody else to do roasting, and that training is going to take you longer. So when you reduce those variables to 1 or 2, batch size and charge temp and gas, the teaching of roasting becomes a lot easier because now you focus more on the table. The adjustments are easier to cup. Versus, we need to change the airflow, the drum speed. We have to change the charge temp or the batch size. We are talking about 4, right?
Right.
And if you have different thermocouples, like mill cities have the bean temp in the front plate, they have another thermocouple in the dryer, and then they have another thermocouple in the environment, and then they have a thermocouple in the exhaust. So you have all these sensor readings. The new probats have all these sensor readings, right? So you have a lot of data to analyze when you do changes.
Totally.
So I think Loring is making it easier to teach, to roast, and more consistent. So, and it's really easy to maintain. I remember back when we were at Corvus and Loring, and Hawk. We have all these cuts in our arms because of the cast iron taking out the cooling tray, the funnel, and all that stuff. We shall be, and Loring is really easy to clean. So easy, and make it easier that has the loader, so you don't lift that much. The cooling tray is really easy to clean. It has filters.
Right.
In general, it's a lot easier, and it's more expensive, but I believe you save time in training, maintenance, labor in general. And it has the profiling automation, and it has the burner recipe, which is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Because when we roast manually and with burner recipe, which also did it on the civets, and then you cup blind, you will not find it. But if you cup burner recipe, profiling, and manual roast, you will find the profiling more easier than those
really
other two.
Interesting. Just because there's so many other variables that you're controlling when trying to profile?
No, profiling is when the machine is trying to match a return temp. So the rate of rise is going to be like a snake. It goes up and down, up, down. The burner recipe just follows the gas recipe, no matter what the bean temp is doing or the return temp is doing. The return temp, because it does the changes based on temp, on the bean temp, right? Not on time, on bean temp. So if it's hotter, it's going to make the changes faster.
Right.
But it's a lot easier.
To roast, it's going to be different based off of how many roasts you've done,
Loring,
how warm
not that much, because with Loring, you have the between batch protocol already set. In a drum roaster, yes, you will have to set up your between batch protocol different. Lowering automatically closes the door, and you can control how long you can open the door, and if you are going, what is your charge temps, and so it's easier to have like a minute and a half between batch protocol. So you can do 4.5 to 5 batches an hour.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it helps you in those ways. And it also depends on the kind of coffees you buy, the density that you buy. If you just roast blenders, it's going to be a lot easier. Denser coffees is a little bit different. But in theory, it just makes it easier. When you grow in a company, you have to start thinking about efficiency and not to burn out the roaster, right? Because if you are just always doing like 20 batches a day doing this, you're just going to get destroyed, right? So lowering helps a lot in that way, because it's just one variable, autoloader, loader, and with the burner recipe, which is just follows the gas, it helps, right? You can pay more attention to the coffee, the reaction of the coffee. Yeah. So I think it's just the more attention you can have, the better, right? When you have all these variables, you are changing airflow. You missed one change, it completely changes the whole roast.
Totally.
So that's why I think it's kind of cool to have those machines.
The more you can focus on green coffee and less variables, the easier it is. Consistency as you grow as a company.
And there is no bad machine either, right?
Yeah,
there is bad coffee and bad roasters, but machines, you can make good coffee in any kind of machine.
Right.
So I'm not saying, So sorry to interrupt, but what would you say?
No. What do you think is for roasters that are maybe just starting out as a hobby, or maybe they just got their first job as a production roaster? What would you say are the most important variables coming from your experience with Cropster and things like that? What variables do you think are most important for you to focus on, whether that be in the green coffee, whether that be variables on the roaster itself? What would you kind of give advice to there?
Just to go to a kitchen and look what the chef is doing. I think roasting and cooking is exactly the same thing.
Okay.
I don't think the chef is going to just stay looking at the pan. It's just looking at the ingredients. And I believe when you go to the grocery store, you just don't buy your groceries with you cover your eyes, right? You are always touching and looking the shape, if it's aged or not, if it's like soft or hard, like those kind of things, right? So I think you have to pay attention what you are buying. And sadly, when you compare Europe to the US, the pricing is sometimes more important than the actual green. And people prefers just to go cheap. And then they ask, you get people like, I think since I got Cropster, this coffee tastes terrible. And it's funny because Cropster has nothing to do with the coffee. And then it's when you realize that the first question we always ask is, do you sample roast? The majority of people don't do sample roasting. They just buy by a price list and a sensor analysis made by the importers. And if you think about it, the importer needs to move coffee. It's not like when you go to the groceries, the fresh fruits are in the back and the older ones are in the front, and they have now color codes and things like that. So importers are not going to move the fresh first. So it's always important to cup, and that's why there is books out there that can help so much to understand coffee, especially the one from Chris Royal, Green Coffee. I really like that book, and especially he's not a curator, which makes it even more interesting to read.
Yeah.
So it gives you hope that you don't need to put that huge investment up front to just learn green coffee.
Right. Yeah.
But that's the advice. Green is the way to go. Again, the machine. I have a friend learning roasting on the popper from
Sweet Maria's.
Sweet Maria's. Yes. Yeah. He's in Breckenridge, and we compare production roast with his coffee roasting there and with the Ikawa. And it's very similar, man. That thing is amazing. So I don't think that it's bad machine. I think it's just bad green and bad roasters.
Yeah,
so, green is key.
I think you told me a long time ago, which is advice that stuck with me, is your job as a roaster is to get out of the way of the green coffee and to try to not impart bad things into the coffee. Like the green coffee is going to be as good as it possibly ever can be in its natural state. And our job as roasters is to try to get out of the way of that and just allow it to be the best that it can be, which I don't think is always, sometimes can be trickier than others, but.
Yeah, the same as cooking, man, you know. You buy a really good piece of meat and then you're scared to pass from the tasty juices to just the hard to chew thing, you know. Yeah. So I think it's just that's why sample roasting is one of the most important tasks as a roaster, no matter the size. And people just forget about it, and they forget that if you don't have a sample roaster, Sui Maria's has so many videos about roasting in so many different, really affordable devices. But people just want Daikawa because it's just a trend, right? It's not a bad machine, but you can find a lot affordable that can do the job as good as that.
Yeah, and on the basis of cupping, as long as you're consistently, roasting the same way for your cuppings, you're then going to be able to get an idea of what the coffee can do and if it's going to be juicy or acidic or, sweet and all those different things, and then actually be able to source coffees not just based off of the marketing that's done from the importers, which obviously their job and their livelihood depends on them moving coffee. But with that, obviously there's a trade-off, right? I mean, every importer is going to want to move the most coffee that they can, and, that's their job. But
the fastest they can because it ages, right?
Right.
So that's another factor. But
how important do you think fresh crop is on a roaster standpoint of getting, how quickly do you think it degrades, and how can you tell if your coffee is degrading?
Based on what my experience is, no matter the fresh or all the milling, I think the more you question how it was milled. So when you buy coffees, always check where the mill was, right? And then you will be surprised. We were roasting. I was helping a company a few months ago, and they bought this wash Ethiopian, and the mill was in the bag. And then they bought another wash Ethiopian. And then I told them to send me a picture of the bag, and it was the same mill. So they roasted exactly the same as the other wash, and it tasted very similar. So I think milling is the curating of coffee. And I think besides the crop, how fresh or not is milling is the way they prepare those lots. So it's pretty cool to also start recording that data, where the mill was. And you can have that information through the importers, right? And that helps you a lot. If a bad milling can do high temps, and those high temps are going to affect the age of the coffee, and it's going to get older way faster.
Right.
Or things like that. So it's pretty cool to do that. And the best example are Kenyas, right? Kenyas is a result of a mill. So, and Kenyas can age really fast.
Yeah.
So besides the fresh or not fresh, you got to do what you got to do, right? You need to serve coffee and all you got is fresh. You have to work with that. But it's important to ask those questions: the variety, process, density, moisture, and milling. Well, where was the mill?
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, where there are multiple coffees that you can buy, all done in the same mill, and that are going to taste very similarly because they're, processed in that similar way, and then milled the same way, and then, just marketed differently from different, growers. And then, essentially...
mostly Africans, you see that a lot in Africa, right? Wash stations and mill. But in Colombia, too, you can see... we have big different mills, and you can always see the one from Cauca they are really, really good millers, but you can have a lot of similarities in coffee. And also in Huila, there is another mill, and Manizal is another mill. So you start learning these different mills, and it's very interesting to have that data. And when you're comparing crops to the sensor analysis and physical analysis, then you can see, oh shoot, look at this, same mill, same behaviors. It's like I don't know, like research when you start collecting those data, and it's pretty cool because it helps you buying coffee, right? It helps you. When you get the samples and you start recording all that information, you take that in consideration when you cup. And when you make the decision of buying or not buying, quantities, right? If this coffee, the mill is aged really well, then I can easily contract more coffee next year because it's it comes from a good place and so on.
Right.
The people that buy from Caravella, I never bought from Caravella, so they are millers, right? They are not producers. They are millers and exporters, and that's why they control most of the South American market. They are like one of the most powerful people in coffee, because they have mills in Mexico, in Guatemala. I don't know Guatemala, but Guatemala they have all the way down to Ecuador. So a companies like Sweet Bloom. So when you interview Eric, ask him about their relationships with Caravella, and they are like super powerful. So they that's why Andy, Sweet Bloom can roast very good, consistent coffee, because the majority of coffees come to Colombia, Taquin, some Mexico and some Guatemala. I don't know if the Guatemala mill they use Caravella, but it's kind of an idea. And if you start doing it, then start collecting those data, and you will see some similarities, which is pretty cool, very helpful.
Is that something that you can do kind of like preset through crops, or is that stuff that you as the user have to be importing of like, hey, this is where the mill came from, this is where I source green?
Yeah, you can do it. I think it's just in professional when you can record more networking.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the professional account is when you can collect that data. That's what I did when I collect mine. It's just always put who the mill, even if you don't have a relationship. I always ask the importer who the mill was, and usually you can find it on the back or more information about the back.
Yeah, absolutely.
But the importers can help you with that too.
So for companies that are trying to get better relationships at origin or processing, would you say a good starting point would be to go to the milling companies like you've mentioned?
Oh, no, not at all. No, milling is just like a variety. What variety is? Oh, Bourbon. Oh, which one the mill was? ABC Millers and I don't know, whatever.
Right.
Just remember to record that. So you will be surprised when you get a coffee again, especially from we bought some coffees from El Salvador, and it came from the same miller and different varieties, but the density was very similar.
Okay, yeah.
So, but that is just like learn the variety of the coffee or the process. This is a natural, come from the mill, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
But it doesn't, like, I'm just saying this when you start buying bigger lots, right? Because we talk about age.
Right.
Did you ask me about fresh or pass or like more older crop? But that's just related when I buy bigger lots. When you buy smaller lots, it doesn't even matter.
Totally.
But yeah,
no,
more data you want, the better decisions you can make.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? The more information you have, the better samples you can get, and then once you're sample roasting, you then can have better informed decisions on how to cup and what you're going to be getting, as opposed to just because and it is difficult, I think, as an owner of just understanding, like, you get bogged down with a lot of things. You've got prices to focus on. You're trying to bring in different lots. And so, cupping just hugely different coffees all the time. And then, having to wait for those samples to get in, purchase them, and then make that order come in, you've got to be pretty well prepared.
You got to be fast because they sell out really fast.
Yeah, especially those high-end lots that, people really want. And if they're at a decent price point that makes it affordable, it goes even faster,
Yes, because some people don't even cup. They just immediately saw a cheaper price, and the sensor analysis by the importer, they just buy it. But yeah.
Yeah. How accurate do you think, for people that are buying green coffee, a lot of the times there's like a cupping score associated with those greens. Do you think that's a marketing gimmick, or do you think that's fairly accurate assessments? Because I've noticed from different importers, their cupping scores seem to vary pretty greatly. So what are your thoughts on that?
Man, for me, that's super subjective. For me, Q grading or grading coffees is super subjective. And I had the chance to see like roasting competitions, right? There is none of them are Q graders. So there were few. And even when I work in some company that have Q graders, and then you can see when they cup how different even they yourselves are, right?
Yeah.
Especially numbers and things like that. So it's a system that is required, right? You need to grade the coffee. You need to give it a points and define that. So I always, depending on who you are buying from, I always suggest having that cup in the room when you are cupping, when you are buying especially, having that, if you are buying for 86 to 85 points, have that 85 there. So when you are buying, you can always compare with the short, whatever certification at 85, so you can compare, right? To have the control, that's what they call it, the control cup. So you learn, but again, I think it's very subjective, and I think each company or each roaster should have his own way of learning and grading and comparing. At the end of the day, the only people that are buying that coffee are your customers, not all these trainers and importers or famous roasters or famous people are never going to buy your coffee. It's a sad reality, right?
Yeah, it's true though.
So it's very important that you set yourself your own parameters to make sure that those who are actually paying for your coffee are consistent, and listen more to them, to actually the industry itself.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
At the end of the day, they are the ones that are helping you pay off your machine, helping you buying those expensive coffees. Not all these famous or graders people, So at the end, they don't pay for your coffee. You obviously send them for free for them to be graded.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's very important. It's very important to listen to your customers, to your market, right? Because that's your market. That's what you are providing.
So how, in your role, because you've been a judge for the past 4 years at the U.S. Coffee Championships on the roasting side of things, how does that fall in? What does kind of that world look like for people that may not be aware of what goes on there?
I try to be a judge in the other competitions, but I realized that we always, coffee people, including myself, we always talk about being biased, right? But when you interview the Onyx person, if you are judging that person, imagine the pressure you mentally have. Again, we talk about power of the dynamic of power.
Right.
When you have these powerful, famous people, and you are ready to judge right there, you cannot be biased. It's impossible.
Totally.
Roasting, its competition is amazing because you just see a number. You don't have a clue who this person is, right? So you eliminate that variable, so you can fully focus in coffee. Sadly, I feel like the US and Europe are way behind. Like, we don't do the competition the same way they do it, right? We still here do some sort of presentation, which for me I don't know still why they make a roaster make a presentation when you go to the world competition. There is no presentation.
Right. It's just on your coffee. Yeah.
So you already are limiting. You already avoiding people that don't feel comfortable talking. So those people are not going to participate. Or if they do, they're going to do a terrible job. And you are sacrificing a person for the way they talk versus the way they perform their roasting. Right? So that right there, we are way behind. And also, they give you 5 coffees, you select 3 to be a blend, to make a blend, and then 1 to roast a single origin. We don't do that, right? We are provided by 1 coffee by the importer, and sometimes it's already really old, bad coffee, so you have to sort it out and all that stuff. So, and then we do like the screen size and things like that they don't do in the world. So it's very interesting. But one of the sad things about judging is that at the end of the competition, you hope people come back to you and ask you like, hey, why'd you score this to me? Why'd you did this? Or how can I improve?
Yeah.
No, usually people don't come back or feedback or nothing.
Yeah.
So,
what's the feedback that you would like to be able to provide to those people? Do you have like certain tendencies you tend to see, or is it very unique to like, ooh, this coffee could be, slightly sweeter, or, maybe.
Yeah, because we cup it. It's the same coffee you cup like 50 people. You're cupping the same coffee 50 times.
Wow.
So you get different areas, right? So you can learn from there yourself what to tell the other one. Oh, we found this cup that was the blah, 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 because this person did this. So when you bring me a cup of coffee is completely the opposite. I already learned what they make this cup good, so I can provide that feedback to the roaster. It's easier when you do like that versus when they send you one coffee to evaluate. Then you have to ask them, hey, can you send me some green? And I can sample roast and evaluate it myself so I have comparison.
Yeah.
But when we are copying 50 coffees, right, we can find a really good one. And the ones below, we can provide that feedback. Oh, this person did this and it worked perfect.
Totally. So would you say,
it's easier
for someone who maybe was going to send you coffee to evaluate, in your ideal world, would they send you some green and then maybe 5 samples from 5 different batches that they ran? And maybe
I will say with Cropster you have reference curve, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it would be cool to see, send me your reference curve, like the coffee that you have selected as this is the one that you serve.
Right.
Send me a sample roast made by you and the green that I can sample roast so you can compare the 3.
Okay.
And I can tell you, right? Because the sample roast, the production roast is not going to make something magic that is going to make the coffee taste way better, right? Extremely different. But yeah, I don't do that though. I don't evaluate coffees.
Yeah. But if you were,
that would be cool, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think some people ask me that, would you do evaluate the coffee? And I tell them, dude, I'm not going to buy your coffee. So I think you should always have that person that always buys your coffee. It's always excited, hey, dude, what you have today? What are you bringing new? That's the person who you should evaluate. Is that person that always buys it? That means he knows the way you roast. He have tasted so many of your coffees.
Right.
And if he comes along your journey, he has learned how to brew it. I bet that person already bought a grinder and so on. So sometimes that person that is always there for you, always supporting you in your shop or not shop, that guy that girl that always comes, gets a cappuccino, buys a bag of coffee and leaves, that's the one that should evaluate your coffee. Especially when you bring new coffees, always give them a sample. Hey, I used to do that at Corvus. When I get a new coffee, I have this person that sits on the bar. We say hello all the time, and I give them some. I tried this. Let me know what you think.
Yeah,
so
because
No,
I was just going to say, at the end of the day, that's who you're roasting coffee for, right? I mean, you're not doing it for Daniel, with Cropster, but I'm doing it for my customers here. And I think for me, it was super interesting coming from Denver and being in the, Denver coffee scene to coming up to Buena Vista. It was so different just because the customer base. And so I had to push myself as a roaster because the market was so different. And it was a great challenge for me. I actually loved it because I was like, man, I've got to, how can I get really rich, roasty, chocolatey, sweet coffees as well as my fruit forward and juicy, because I still want to, at the end of the day, I want to roast coffees that I'm excited about and love, but I'm also wanting to sell coffees. And so, and it was fun. I love a rich, creamy, chocolatey, coffee, wherever that may be, from Mexico, Brazil, or wherever. And, that pushes you as a roaster to want to develop and get better. So.
But who can provide you the feedback is the people that are in Buena Vista, right? That's the market that reacts in your roast. And
right.
I think when you send it to me, I'm in Denver, and I will always going to compare it with something else, and I don't even know your market. So never forget about your market, but never forget about yourself too, right?
Yep.
Sometimes if you just hear your market, then you end up just roasting the same as a Starbucks, because the markets that are so new are so used to Starbucks that sometimes you have to do what they do. But when you can bring new things and listen to feedback and at the same time teaching and so on. So it's always good to be compared, always good to send to other people. Exchange between roasters, I think, is a pretty cool thing. I have a good friend in Texas, Jitters. He's always exchanging with people, with roasters, and I think that's pretty cool. Yeah. You can say, hey, I cup like this, cup my coffees like this, use these recipes to brew. And between roasters, they are talking the same way, right? So it's always pretty cool when you do between roasters that are not in your market, that is not immediately competition, because an immediately competition is not going to say your coffee is terrible, right? No, I'm just going to hide it and keeping you just roasting bad or something like that. But there is also a lot of books, man. There is for me, bad roasting is defects. Rob Hood just released this $5 digital book about roasting defects. That's affordable. A lot of knowledge you can learn from it.
What other books would you recommend to people? Because Rob also did the modulating the flavor profile.
That was amazing.
Yeah, it's
I think
that
is, again, the same as machines. There is no bad books or good books. They are just good things and bad things. Just take the good, leave the bad behind, and just learn. One of my favorite, I have it here, is Dear Coffee Buyer from, let me show it to you. He used to live in Denver. I think he moved, but Ryan Brown, Dear Coffee Buyer.
Okay, cool.
That's a really cool book. And my favorite right now is the green book from Chris, The Green Coffee. Have you read it?
No, I haven't read it yet. I'll have to
from Rose Magazine. It's like $60.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's a really, really good.
Rose Magazine does some great stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. They're doing the Rose Summit really soon, and it's free, so you can listen to a lot of people there.
Okay, cool.
There is a girl from Colombia. Her name is Jimara. She did a lot of what I told you about the milling. She did it with the water activity and sample roasting.
Oh, fascinating.
She did this whole research comparing water activity with sensor analysis. It was amazing.
Interesting.
So, yeah. So that Coffee Summit from Rose Magazine soon is a free online event, I think. Pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So,
and they're just having all different kinds of peoples in, whether it be like what kind of guests are going to be.
I think it's going to be Scott Rao now that he's roasting.
Okay.
He's going to be there. Jimara is going to be there too. Last time they did it in Seattle, it was Rob who's talking about sample roasting. It was an amazing one. And I think you can access online to that, but you have to reach out to Rose Magazine to see.
Yeah,
because
for sure.
I went to that one. That sample roasting class was awesome. Jimara did an amazing class.
That's great.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think Rob's going to come on the podcast here maybe at the beginning of March. So, yeah, I'm excited. He has such a wealth of knowledge, and he's roasted for so many people. And I know you've pulled a lot
like physics or like chemical reactions. That's the guy that can tell you all about it.
Yeah,
he loves that side of the coffee. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of people, even for myself, right, there's so much more that goes into coffee that you can dive into. And I think what's exciting for me is I'm seeing the market. There's so many people getting into home roasting because, like you said, it's so affordable. It's a hobby that people can get into. And so I think there's just a huge push of like new small micro roasters coming up. And so, there's just a huge world out there of, what people can get into. What advice would you give those people that are just starting out?
Cupping.
Cup.
Is, I think, the only thing that helped me to understand coffee is cupping. You cannot just roast. The machine, in order to understand what the machine is doing, is cupping. So always cup and always learn how your machine works.
Totally.
We get a lot of people at Crapster when they buy Dietrichs, and they used to roast on a Probat or a Giesen, and then switching to Dietrich is a completely different cooking style.
Totally.
Right? So you need to learn your machine. You need to learn troubleshooting your machine, maintenance, how the heat application works, how the burner works, how the airflow travels, where are the sensors and what are they measuring, and all those things are super important. And then cupping again and learn how to buy. Like this coffee from Dear Coffee Buyer, it's very important because it's going to teach you how the green coffee is, or when you sample roast, is one of the most important things because you are controlling what is entering into your house.
Yeah,
right?
I love it. That's great.
It's going to help you finding. It's funny because you become a Q grader. And the funny part, I went to this Roasters Guild class made by an Ecuadorian girl that she was amazing. She did a class about roasting, green grading defects. But at the same time, at the Roasters Guild, we were having this espresso machine, and there is these baristas making you coffee, and they have this blend, and it was very tasty. And then you get to this class, and then you learn, she put you all the defects, and the worst defects are the ones you cannot see on green: mold, phenol, and age.
Yeah.
The rest of them you can see it, right? Ferment, black seeds, chipped. or like the shells and things like that. And she did the blend that we were drinking at Roasters Guild, 40% was with those defects.
Wow. Wow.
So sometimes we judging coffees by the green grading without tasting it. And the worst defects you don't see. That was amazing. That was amazing class.
Yeah, because it, again, comes back to what you said, if it all comes from the cup, right? If you're able to cup multiple coffees next to each other, you're then hopefully going to be able to pick up on some of those defects that you're never going to see on green. You know, and so if you're not sample roasting, you may get a lot that's defected, and you'd never know it if you didn't, you know, sample, roast, and then cup. So.
And for home roasters, you can find even small roasters, not even home, but they grow out. And believe it or not, they come to Cropster too. We got a time that we were just getting a lot of home roasters, and Cropster is not free, right? And we think Cropster is this profiling software, but it's not. It's more than that, because profiling is just the job of a roaster, but the business owner is looking, what is we getting? What samples are we analyzing? How much green coffee we have in A, B warehouses? How much are we roasting per hour? How many batches an hour are we doing? What are they tasting like? So with home roasters and small roaster, I encourage you to use your spouse to cup. Don't cup by yourself. That's a huge mistake. Always cup with somebody else. You need a second sensory. It's very important to have a second opinion.
Right.
And no matter if that person is super knowledgeable about coffee or not, it's a sensor analysis that is really cool to pick up and record in your coffees, because it's going to help you improve it. Or your best friend or whoever, always cup minimal of the same as minimal 2 cups, minimal of 2 people. Don't cup by yourself.
Right. And it's a cool opportunity too for your customers, right? If you're able to, that person always comes in and say like, hey, would you ever want to do a cupping? It's a fun experience for a customer to see how it is. And then, you know, that's another, whether their palate's really developed or they can put words to it, it's a different palate and ultimately that's who you're selling to, right? So if they're able to taste certain things and say, wow, this is really, you know, sweet. And you're like, oh, well, I actually was going for more acidity on this, but I'm glad that you're picking that up, you know, and maybe I should lean more toward, you know, and you can just kind of adjust to what your consumer is wanting. And it's a fun experience that they get to kind of see an intimate back working that us as roasters aren't always like, you know, showing the messy process of cuppings and stuff. So.
And it helps you get in those flavors that you put on the bags, right?
Right.
And some people taste something that I never tasted, but let's put it on the bag, right?
Totally.
So, but yeah, so always cup with somebody else, and at the same time, I forgot what I was going to say, because it helps you to, when you have more people. When a company grows, the biggest mistake is one person becomes one green buyer. When a company has one green buyer, the coffees are going to taste very similar. Again, we are not biased. If I have become a green buyer for a company, I always going to look, for me, Daniel Mendoza, look florality, citric notes, wash Ethiopians, right?
Right.
So I always going to evaluate better those who has citric acid and florality and jasmine and all the clementines, tangelo and all that crap. So I always gonna point higher those. But when you have a second buyer, when you have a third buyer, like when you become the head roaster is the green buyer, the production roaster can have an origin, right? The second production can have or your lead barista can be in charge of selecting Africans and Central America. When you have those, you will see how amazing your coffee lineup is. But when you leave it to one, it's going to be very similar.
Yeah.
So,
and it goes back to the, you know, how subjective coffee is, right? Like my palate and what I like, it's impossible to be unbiased based off of what I like, because I prefer more juicy coffees as opposed to more citric. And so those, you know, it's not wrong. Like there's nothing wrong with really citric
But
poppy.
if you have both of those, it's going to be amazing.
Exactly. So if you're doing the citric and I'm doing the more malic and the more juicy notes, then boom, then we get some really good diversity, and we can cup together on the table. And, you know, I can evaluate things and we can find a really good middle ground. And so our Africans and our Ethiopians and our Guatemalans and our Costa Ricans are all on point. So it's great advice.
I think that's pretty cool to have. And you will be surprised how when you're offering something like that, it's amazing. You get more people buying because they are when you are just a single buyer, dude, it just becomes boring. And that's why people just go to subscription that have multiple coffees.
Totally.
Multiple companies, because they just don't want to buy the same coffee all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Daniel, any other last things you want to leave us with? Is there a thing that you wish you would have known when starting out in coffee that you now know after all these years of experience and working with Corvus and with Cropster and with everyone that you've been a part of, with Hawk?
Tea. I wish I discovered tea before.
Okay.
Tea is fragrance. Coffee has no fragrance. Oh, very hard to get fragrance just when you grind it, right? That's why you smell the grounds is the fragrance. But tea, all is fragrance. That's why you can eat garlic and still taste tea. And tea has opened up my sensor analysis so much.
Interesting.
Has helped a lot of people develop better palate and better senses on your nose in a way.
Yeah.
So I wish I had discovered tea before. I think make you a better copper, and it helps you in so many other ways. But because when you buy tea versus you buy coffee, when you learn about tea producers, it's mind-blowing.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And you want to transfer that to coffee producers, which they are playing soccer, what you buy versus tea producers, they brew the tea for you. Now it's changing. There is some young producers trying to do roasting and presenting you the coffee in a way, send you curves like a Kawa profiles to roast the coffee the way they do it, and that's pretty cool. So hopefully we get there soon.
Awesome. Well, this is one question I've been wanting to ask you do you think there's a market for specialty tea shops in the United States? And do you think no? Okay. I was hopeful, man. You got me hooked on Spirit Tea, and the presentation they did was awesome. And I just felt like it was a market that could be there, but isn't really.
Impossible. No, man. We have drive-thrus still, Ventis. Coffees now, they want it now. Tea bags, and when companies decided to go through tea bags, is going backwards, right? Totally. It's like selling ground coffee on bags. You don't have ground coffee in your shop, right? You grind it for them after. Yeah. But it's the same way. But I think America is a fast-going market that people don't want to. Now, with Spirit Tea and some other companies, we are trying to slow down when roasters serve the tea in a brewer. Yeah, it slows you down, and it helps, right? So no, I don't think it will survive. Okay. Yeah, this year I think like 4 or 5 tea shops that I know closed their tea. Man. Yeah, tea requires coffee, man. There is no way. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for coming on. It was awesome to have you, friend. And I wish you the best of luck, and thanks for all your advice and resources. It was great. Awesome, dude. Awesome. Thank you.